Hey guys, welcome back to another journey through history's worst career choices. Before we dive in tonight, I need you to do something for me. Look around your room right now. Notice that clean water within arm's reach, that soft bed you'll sleep in tonight. The bathroom just down the hall? Good, remember all of that. Because for the next hour or so, you're gonna forget it exists. Tonight, we're talking about pirates. Not the swashbuckling romantic pirates of Hollywood. Not Johnny Depp with perfect teeth and magical compasses. We're talking about the real deal. The absolute worst job in human history, practiced by some of the most desperate, brutal, and frankly insane people who ever lived. And you're about to become one of them. If this sounds like fun to you, go ahead and hit that like button now. Because in about 10 minutes you're gonna be too busy trying not to die of dysentery to remember. And subscribe if you want more historically accurate nightmare fuel delivered straight to your subscription fee. Trust me, your ancestors suffered through worse things than clicking a button. Now let's get you recruited. It's 1715, and you're standing on a dock in Port Royal, Jamaica. The year doesn't matter much. Could be 1650. Could be 1750. The smell hits you first. Imagine every terrible smell you've ever encountered. Then multiply it by the tropical heat, and add the sweet stench of human misery. That's what freedom smells like. Apparently, you're here because you literally have no other choice. Maybe you were pressed into naval service and decided mutiny looked better than another flogging. Maybe you were a merchant sailor whose ship got taken, and joining up seemed preferable to a watery grave. Or maybe, and this is statistically most likely, you're so desperately poor that even piracy looks like a step up. The recruiter isn't what you expected. His name is Black Sam, though he's not particularly black and definitely not particularly clean. He's missing 2 fingers, 3 teeth, and what appears to be a significant portion of his sanity. But he's got a silver tongue and a promise that sounds too good to be true. Equal shares of treasure, democratic voting, and all the adventure you can handle. Spoiler alert. It is too good to be true. Sign here, Sam says, pointing to a piece of parchment that's seen better decades. This is your pirate's code. Your articles of agreement. You can't read, most people can't. So Sam reads it aloud. Equal shares, yes. Democracy, absolutely. Medical insurance? Well, they'll saw off whatever gets infected. So that's something. What he doesn't mention is the fine print. The part where you'll spend months at sea, eating weevil-infested hardtack and drinking water that's more algae than H2. The part where equal shares means equally sharing in absolutely nothing when you don't catch any prizes. The part where democracy means you get to vote on which horrible death you'll probably die. But you sign anyway. What choice do you have? Congratulations, you're now a pirate. Try not to let it go to your head. You probably won't live long enough for that to matter. Welcome aboard the Revenge. She's a stolen sloop, about 60 feet of rotting wood, held together by prayer, tar, and the collective delusion that she won't sink before the next port. Your new home is smaller than most modern bathrooms and houses about 40 of the most dangerous, desperate men in the Caribbean. Let's start with the tour, shall we? First stop, your quarters. Actually, scratch that. You don't have quarters. You have approximately 6 feet of space on the gun deck where you'll sleep, eat, and contemplate your life choices. If you're lucky, you'll get a hammock. If not, enjoy the feeling of wet wood against your back for the next several months. The smell down here is indescribable, but I'll try anyway. Imagine a gym locker that's been sealed for a year, filled with rotting fish, human waste, and the dreams of 40 unwashed men. Now add tropical humidity and the constant motion that makes sure nothing ever quite dries out. That's your new bedroom. Moving on. The galley. This is where Cookie, and yes, that's actually his name, performs what he generously calls cooking. Cookie has never heard of vitamins, vegetables, or basic food safety. His philosophy is simple. If it's not moving and hasn't turned completely black, it's edible. You'll learn to appreciate this optimistic approach to nutrition. The main course for the foreseeable future is hardtack ship's biscuit. so hard it could stop a musket ball. Soaked in ale if you're lucky, seawater if you're not. The protein comes from weevils, which are actually a blessing because they add a nutty crunch and prove the food isn't completely devoid of life. Next up, the head. That's pirate speak for bathroom, and it's literally just a hole cut in the front of the ship where you hang your backside over the ocean and hope the waves don't splash back. Privacy is a luxury you left on shore along with dignity and regular meal. Oh, and ladies and gentlemen watching at home, toilet paper won't be invented for another century and a half. You'll be using whatever rope or sailcloth you can find, sometimes seaweed if you're feeling fancy. Let me introduce you to your new family, and I use that term in the most dysfunctional sense possible. There's Captain Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts. Not the famous one, just a guy who thought the name sounded intimidating. He's actually a failed accountant from Bristol, who turned to piracy after embezzling church funds. He keeps meticulous records of everything they steal, which would be admirable if they ever stole anything worth recording. Your quartermaster is a Welshman named Gwelym who speaks 3 languages fluently and kills people in all of them. He's the ship's disciplinarian, which means when you screw up, and you will screw up, he's the one who decides whether you get flogged, keel-hauled, or just thrown overboard. He takes this responsibility very seriously. Then there's Benjamin, the ship's surgeon, and I use that title very loosely. His medical training consists of watching other people die and taking notes on what didn't work. His surgical instruments are a rusty saw, a bottle of rum for anesthesia, and an unwavering belief that most problems can be solved by amputation. The good news is that Benjamin is very fast. The bad news is that speed and accuracy are not the same thing. Your bunkmate, and when I say bunkmate I mean the guy whose elbow you'll be intimately familiar with for the next 6 months, is Tommy the Rat. He earned this nickname not because he's sneaky or untrustworthy, but because he literally lived with rats for so long that he's developed their mannerisms. He hoards food, makes clicking noises when he's nervous, and his idea of personal hygiene would make actual rats file a complaint. But here's the thing about Tommy. He's been alive for 3 years as a pirate, which makes him practically ancient in this profession. He's going to teach you everything you need to know about survival, and his first lesson is simple: trust no one, especially him. Your typical day starts at 4 a.m., not because there's an alarm clock, but because the ship never stops moving and neither does the work. Sleep is something that happens when you're too exhausted to stay awake, which is usually about 20 minutes after you lie down. First up, pumping the bilge. This is where all the water that's constantly leaking into your ship collects, along with rat droppings, vomit, and substances you'd rather not identify. Your job is to pump this delightful cocktail back into the ocean before it rises high enough to sink you. It's like playing defense against entropy itself, and entropy has the home field advantage. After breakfast, and I use that term generously, you'll help maintain the sails. This involves climbing up the rigging in whatever weather God has decided to throw at you that day. The ropes are slick with salt spray. The wind is trying to knock you into the ocean, and the ship is rolling like a drunk sailor, which coincidentally describes most of your crewmates. Heights got you nervous. Too bad. The rigging is where boys become men, and where men become shark food. The trick is to never look down and always maintain 3 points of contact. The guys who forget this rule leave very brief, wet splashes in the ship's wake. Mid-morning brings gunnery practice. You'll learn to load, aim, and fire cannons that weigh more than a small car and have a tendency to explode without warning. The goal is to hit enemy ships, but mostly you'll hit water, occasionally hit whales, and very rarely hit the broadside of anything useful. The afternoon is for maintenance, scraping barnacles off the hull while hanging over the side in a bosun's chair, mending sails with fingers that haven't quite figured out how to work a needle, and pretending to listen while the captain explains his brilliant new plan to attack a Spanish treasure galleon with a crew of 40 idiots and 4 working cannons. Evenings, if you're lucky, bring storytelling. The old hands will regale you with tales of successful raids, narrow escapes, and the time they definitely saw a mermaid. These stories get more elaborate with each telling, and more believable with each drink of rum. Speaking of rum, it's not just a beverage, it's a food group. The water goes bad after a few weeks at sea, so rum is often the only safe thing to drink. This explains a lot about pirate decision-making. Let's talk about what you'll be eating. And I apologize in advance for ruining your appetite. Hardtack is your bread, your cereal, your everything. It's flour and water baked into something approaching the density of ceramic. When it's fresh, and by fresh, I mean less than 6 months old, you can break it with your teeth. When it's older, you'll need to soak it in whatever liquid you can find and pray the weevils have chewed it up enough to make it digestible. The weevils, by the way, are your friends. They're protein. They're also proof that the hardtack isn't completely inedible, because something is managing to live in it. When you find hardtack without weevils, be suspicious. That means even the bugs have given up on it. Salt pork is your main course most days. It's pig preserved in so much salt that it could survive a nuclear holocaust. Before cooking, you'll need to soak it in seawater to remove some of the salt, which tells you everything you need to know about how much salt we're talking about. The end result tastes like leather soaked in brine, assuming leather had a worse personality. When you're lucky enough to catch fish, they go straight into a pot with whatever vegetables haven't rotted yet. This creates a dish called sea pie, which is neither particularly sea-related, nor resembling anything you'd recognize as pie. It's more like a dare someone turned into dinner. Fresh water is rationed at about 1 gallon per person per day, which sounds like a lot until you realize you're sweating constantly in tropical heat while doing manual labor. By day 3, you'll understand why pirates were always drinking rum. By day 7, you'll understand why they were always angry. Vitamin C, never heard of her. Scurvy will become your constant companion. Your gums will bleed, your teeth will fall out, and old wounds will reopen for no apparent reason. The cure is fresh citrus fruit, but good luck finding a lime tree in the middle of the Atlantic. Oh, and here's a fun fact. The ship's cat isn't a pet, it's pest control and emergency protein. When the rats get too bold or the food runs too low, Mr. Whiskers becomes the guest of honor at dinner. Pirates were nothing if not practical. Let's discuss cleanliness, or rather the complete absence of it. You'll get to bathe when it rains, which in the Caribbean happens frequently but never when you need it to. The rest of the time, you're marinating in your own filth like a very sad, very smelly pickle. Your clothes will rot off your body before they wear out. The salt air, constant moisture, and tropical sun create the perfect conditions for fabric to simply dissolve. Most pirates end up wearing whatever they can steal or trade for, which explains why they looked like they shopped at the world's worst thrift store. Dental hygiene involves chewing on rope fibers to clean your teeth, assuming you still have teeth to clean. Most pirates develop a distinctive lisp from missing front teeth, which makes their threats sound less intimidating and more like Daffy Duck having a bad day. Personal laundry is washing your clothes in seawater, which cleans them about as well as you'd expect. The salt never rinses out completely, so your clothes develop a crystalline crunch that chafes against your skin. It's like wearing sandpaper that smells like dead fish. Hair care involves occasionally hacking off the worst tangles with a knife and hoping the sun bleaches out some of the accumulated filth. Most pirates end up looking like they stuck their finger in an electrical socket. If electrical sockets had been invented and also smelled terrible. And let's not even discuss what happens when someone gets sick. With 40 men living in close quarters with no understanding of germ theory, illness spreads through the crew like gossip at a church social. Dysentery, typhoid, and various tropical diseases take turns decimating the crew, and the ship's surgeon's solution to everything is drink more rum and try not to die. Here's where Hollywood got it really wrong. Pirate violence wasn't swashbuckling sword fights with witty banter. It was brutal, desperate, and usually over very quickly. Most pirate ships never fired their cannons in anger. They were essentially floating intimidation devices. The goal was to scare merchant ships into surrendering without a fight, because actual fighting was expensive, dangerous, and had a tendency to damage the very cargo you were trying to steal. When combat did happen, it was nasty, brutish, and short. Sword fighting on a rolling deck is nothing like the movies. It's slipping on wet wood while trying not to get gutted by someone who's just as terrified and desperate as you are. The winner is usually whoever stays upright longest. Firearms are single-shot weapons that take forever to reload and don't work when wet. Which is always, you get one chance to hit your target, and if you miss, you're down to fighting with a very expensive club. Most pirates carried multiple pistols for this reason, turning themselves into walking ammunition dumps. The real violence was the grinding, daily brutality of life at sea. Floggings for minor infractions, men dying from infected wounds that wouldn't kill a house cat today, and the constant knowledge that everyone around you would sell you out for an extra share of non-existent treasure. Keel hauling was a real punishment, and it was exactly as horrible as it sounds. They'd drag you under the ship from one side to the other, letting the barnacles on the hull scrape you raw, assuming you didn't drown first. It was reserved for serious crimes like stealing from the crew or trying to desert. Walking the plank, however, was mostly a myth. Why waste a perfectly good plank when you could just throw someone overboard? Pirates were many things, but wasteful wasn't one of them. Every pirate ship had its articles, a written code of conduct that would make a modern HR department weep. These weren't suggestions, they were laws enforced with immediate and often terminal consequences. Article 1. Everyone gets an equal share of prizes taken. This sounds fair until you realize that equal share of nothing is still nothing, and most pirate expeditions were spectacular failures that netted less than a legitimate merchant voyage. Article 2. No gambling with cards or dice. This one was actually practical, since gambling led to fights and fights led to people going overboard in the middle of the night. Instead, they gambled with everything else: food rations, watch duties, and the few personal possessions anyone had. Article 3. Lights and candles out by 8 o'clock. Fire on a wooden ship in the middle of the ocean is everyone's worst nightmare. Plus, candles were expensive and pirates were chronically broke. Article 4. Keep your weapons clean and ready. This made sense since your life depended on your equipment working when you needed it. Regular inspections were held, and failing meant extra watch duty or worse. Article 5. No striking another crew member aboard ship. All disputes were to be settled on shore with pistols or swords. This prevented ship-destroying brawls, but led to some very awkward shore leaves where half the crew was trying to kill the other half. The punishment for breaking these articles ranged from loss of shares to marooning to death, depending on the severity of the crime and the mood of the crew. Justice was swift, brutal, and democratic. Everyone got to vote on how you'd be punished. Marooning was considered worse than death. They'd leave you on a deserted island with a pistol, a bottle of water, and the hope that you'd do the honorable thing before the water ran out. Let's destroy another Hollywood myth. Pirates were not swimming in treasure. Most were perpetually broke, desperate, and one bad raid away from starvation. The golden age of piracy lasted about 30 years. And during that time, maybe a dozen pirates actually got rich. The rest lived hand to mouth, stealing cargo that was usually worth less than the cost of the expedition to steal it. Spanish treasure fleets were real, but they were also heavily guarded floating fortresses crewed by professional soldiers. Attacking one with a converted merchant vessel was like trying to rob Fort Knox with a water pistol. It could be done, but the odds were not in your favor. Most pirate prizes were mundane merchant vessels carrying everyday goods, cloth, tools, food, and other necessities. Exciting? No. Profitable? Barely. The average pirate raid netted each crew member less than what a legitimate sailor made in wages. But here's the thing about desperation. It makes people do incredibly stupid things. Like chase Spanish galleons across the Caribbean with 4 cannons and a press. Like attacking fortified ports with crews of 40 men. Like believing that this time would be different. This time they'd hit the big score. When pirates did occasionally capture something valuable, the money disappeared quickly. Port towns were expensive, especially when you had to pay bribes to officials, supplies for the ship, and enough rum to forget how miserable your life was. Most pirates were broke again within weeks of a successful raid. The few who did accumulate wealth faced a different problem. Where do you keep treasure when you live on a ship with 40 other desperate criminals? Buried treasure wasn't romance, it was necessity. And most pirates forgot where they buried it or died before they could return. Welcome to the 18th century, where medicine was more art than science and the art was abstract expressionism performed by blind people. Scurvy will be your first enemy. Your gums will swell and bleed, your teeth will fall out, and old wounds will reopen. You'll feel constantly exhausted and your bones will ache like you've been beaten with hammers. The cure is vitamin C, but good luck explaining vitamins to people who think illness is caused by bad air. Yellow fever was the big killer in the Caribbean. It earned its name from the way victims' skin turned yellow as their liver failed. The mortality rate was about 50%. And there was no treatment beyond prayer and rum. Ships would lose half their crew to yellow fever in a matter of weeks. Malaria was endemic in tropical ports. The periodic fevers would lay you out for days at a time, assuming they didn't kill you outright. Pirates called it the fever, and it was so common that crew contracts often included clauses about what to do with a man's shares when he inevitably died from it. Dysentery was a constant problem. Bad water, worse food, and non-exempt sanitation created perfect conditions for intestinal parasites. You'd spend weeks doubled over with cramps, losing weight you couldn't afford to lose, and praying you wouldn't die from dehydration. Wounds were death sentence. A simple cut could become infected, and an infection meant gangrene, and gangrene meant amputation or death. The ship's surgeon's solution to everything was to cut it off and hope for the best. Many pirates were missing fingers, toes, hands, or feet from medical procedure. The average lifespan of a pirate was about 2 years from the time they first set sail. Some died in combat, but most died from disease, accident, or simple exhaustion. The sea didn't discriminate. It killed the brave and cowardly with equal enthusiasm. The Caribbean might look like paradise, but it's trying to kill you in a dozen creative ways. Hurricane season lasts from June to November, which means half the year is spent dodging storms that can sink your ship without warning. Weather forecasting consists of watching the sky and hoping the old salts can read the signs correctly. They usually can't. When storms hit, you'll spend days or weeks fighting to keep the ship afloat. Waves the size of buildings will crash over the deck, trying to wash you overboard. The wind will howl like a living thing, and the ship will flex and creak like it's about to break apart at any moment. Between storms you get to deal with the tropical sun, which will bake you during the day and leave you shivering at night. Sunburn is a constant problem, and skin cancer is a death sentence you won't live long enough to die from. Rain comes in 2 varieties, not enough, and too much. During dry spells you'll ration water so strictly that you'll dream about drinking. During rainy season you'll be constantly soaked, and everything on the ship will grow mold and rot. The doldrums are worse than storms. These are areas near the equator where the wind simply stops. You'll sit motionless for weeks, rationing water and food while the tropical sun slowly cooks everyone aboard. Men have been known to go mad from the heat and boredom. And then there are waterspouts, tornadoes at sea that can destroy a ship in minutes. You'll see them coming from miles away, black funnels connecting the ocean to the sky, and there's nothing you can do but pray they miss you. After months at sea, any port looks like paradise. You're wrong, but you're too desperate to care. Port Royal, Jamaica was the pirate capital of the Caribbean, and it was exactly as awful as you'd expect. Imagine Las Vegas designed by people with no understanding of civil engineering, urban planning, or basic human decency. Every building was a tavern, brothel, or gambling den, and most were all three. The first thing you'll do is spend all your money on rum, because after months of rationed water and hardtack, getting spectacularly drunk feels like a basic human right. The second thing you'll do is regret getting spectacularly drunk, because hangovers are worse in tropical heat. Prostitutes were everywhere, and they were often the only women pirates saw for months at a time. They were also frequently the source of diseases that would kill you slowly and unpleasantly.
Syphilis was called the French disease by the English and the English disease by the French, proving that even deadly infections could be political. Gambling was the fastest way to lose whatever money you'd earned from months of risery. Dice games, card games, and betting on anything that moved separated pirates from their shares with ruthless efficiency. Most left port poorer than when they'd arrived. Fights were constant. Drunk, desperate men with weapons and grudges created a volatile mix. Port authorities dealt with this by designating certain areas where pirates could kill each other without bothering the legitimate businesses. It was an early form of zoning law. Shopping for supplies was an adventure in creative accounting. Port merchants knew pirates had money to spend and marked up prices accordingly. A simple meal could cost a week's wages, and ship supplies were priced like luxury goods. Let's address the elephant in the room: relationships on pirate ships. First, women on pirate ships were rare, but not unheard of. Anne Bonny and Mary Red were real pirates who fought alongside men and were considered equally dangerous. They had to be twice as tough to survive in a world that didn't think they belonged there. Most pirate ships banned women not out of chivalry but out of practicality. 40 desperate men competing for the attention of one woman was a recipe for violence that could destroy crew cohesion. It was safer to keep the ships male only and deal with the consequences. Those consequences included what historians politely call alternative arrangements. When you're at sea for months with only men for company, human nature finds a way. Pirate ships developed their own social structures that would make modern sociologists write very interesting papers. Matelotage was a formal partnership system where pirates would pair up and share everything: resources, responsibilities, and often bed. These partnerships could be practical, emotional, or both. When one partner died, the other inherited their share of any treasure. Romance on shore was usually commercial in nature. After months at sea, pirates weren't known for their social skills or personal hygiene. Professional companionship was often their only option for human intimacy. Marriage was complicated when your job involved sailing away for months at a time to commit crime. Many pirates had wives and families they supported from their ill-gotten gains, leading to complicated relationships where everyone involved pretended not to know where the money came from.
Some pirates retired from the profession to settle down, though retirement often meant found a more stable way to commit crimes. Former pirates became smugglers, gamblers, or tavern keepers, using their skills in less immediately dangerous professions. What kind of person becomes a pirate? The answer might surprise you. Ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. Most pirates weren't born criminals. They were merchant sailors whose ships were captured, soldiers whose wars ended, or simply poor men who saw no other options for survival. Piracy was often the last choice of people who had run out of choices. The democratic era of pirate ships attracted men who had no voice in legitimate society. Poor sailors on merchant or naval vessels were treated like property, but pirates could vote on their leadership and share in their success. It was the closest thing to equality many would ever experience. The promise of quick wealth was intoxicating even when the reality was grinding poverty. Hope is a powerful motivator, and pirates lived on the hope that the next ship would be the one that made them rich. It usually wasn't, but hope doesn't require evidence. Many pirates were running from something. Debts, crimes, failed relationships, or simply lives that hadn't turned out as planned. The sea offered anonymity and a chance to reinvent yourself, even if that reinvention involved becoming an outlaw. The brotherhood of the ship created intense bonds between men who had nothing else. Your crewmates were your family, your safety net, and often your only reason for staying alive. This loyalty was real, even when everything else about pirate life was harsh and unforgiving. Some men were simply drawn to the adventure and freedom, even knowing the risks. The idea of answering to no authority but their own was worth the danger of violent death. These were often the most successful pirates, because they genuinely believed in what they were doing. Others were psychopaths who found in piracy a socially acceptable outlet for violence and cruelty. These men were dangerous to everyone around them, including their own crews. But they were also often effective in combat situations. Spoiler alert. Most pirate careers end badly. Death in combat was actually one of the better outcomes. It was quick, heroic in a twisted way, and meant you didn't have to endure the slow decline that awaited most pirates. The lucky ones died fighting. The unlucky ones died slowly from disease, starvation, or the accumulated damage of their lifestyle. Capture by authorities was a death sentence with extra steps. Pirate trials were theatrical events designed to demonstrate the power of legitimate authority. The outcome was never in doubt. The only question was whether you'd be hanged quickly or tortured first as an example to others. Many pirates died from accidents at sea, falling from rigging, getting caught in storms, or simply disappearing overboard in the night were common fates. The ocean was an equal opportunity killer that didn't care about your reputation or skills. Disease killed more pirates than combat ever did. Tropical fevers, scurvy, dysentery, and infections from untreated wounds decimated pirate crews. The constant exposure to harsh conditions wore down even the strongest men. Some pirates simply vanished. They'd leave port one day and never return. Whether they died at sea, were killed by their crews, or simply decided to disappear was often never known. The ocean keeps its secret. Retirement was possible but rare. A few successful pirates managed to accumulate enough wealth to buy pardons and settle down to legitimate lives. Henry Morgan became a plantation owner and lieutenant governor of Jamaica. But for every Morgan, there were hundreds of pirates who died poor and forgotten. Betrayal was common. Crew members would turn each other in for bounty money, or captains would sell out their crews to save themselves. Honor among thieves was a romantic notion that rarely survived contact with reality. The average pirate career lasted about 2 years. Most men who became pirates were dead, captured, or had fled the profession within that time. The survivors were either extraordinarily lucky, exceptionally skilled, or smart enough to quit while they were ahead. Let's talk about how pirate stories actually end, because it's rarely sailing off into the sunset with a hold full of treasure. When authorities finally caught pirates, the trials were public spectacles designed to demonstrate that crime didn't pay. Admiralty courts had special jurisdiction over maritime crimes, and their judges were not known for their mercy or sense of humor. The evidence required for conviction was minimal. Being found on a pirate ship was usually sufficient, regardless of whether you joined voluntarily or been forced into service. The courts weren't interested in nuance. They wanted example. Testimony from captured merchants or naval officers carried more weight than anything the defendants could say in their own defense. Pirates were assumed guilty until proven innocent, and proof of innocence was nearly impossible to provide. The sentence was always the same: death by hanging. The condemned would be transported to a public location, usually near the waterfront where sailors could see them, and hanged as a warning to others considering a life of piracy. Execution day was a public holiday. Crowds would gather to watch pirates meet their fate. Vendors would sell food and drink, and the condemned men would often give speeches warning others against following their path. It was entertainment, education, and social control all wrapped up in one gory package. Some pirates faced their deaths with defiance, making speeches about freedom and refusing to show fear. Others begged for mercy, confessed their crimes, and hoped for divine forgiveness. Most were simply terrified men trying to maintain some dignity in their final moment. The bodies were often left hanging in iron cages called gibbets, as a warning to other sailors. These gruesome displays could be seen for miles and served as stark reminders of what happened to those who chose piracy over legitimate work. Captain Kidd's body hung in a gibbet for 20 years, slowly decaying in full view of everyone entering London's harbor. It was effective advertising for the benefits of law-abiding careers. Everything you think you know about pirates is probably wrong,
and Hollywood is mostly to blame. Treasure maps with X marks the spot were not a thing. Most pirates were too illiterate to draw maps, and treasure buried in the ground was treasure that couldn't be spent on rum and prostitutes. The whole concept was invented by Robert Louis Stevenson for Treasure Island. Walking the plank was rare to non-existent. Why waste good lumber when you could just throw someone overboard? Pirates were practical people who didn't waste resources on theatrical executions. Yo-ho! And a bottle of rum was not a pirate song. It was invented for Stevenson's novel and later popularized by Disney. Real pirates had sea shanties, but they were working songs designed to coordinate physical labor, not cheerful drinking songs. Pirates didn't say our constant. This speech pattern was invented by Robert Newton for his portrayal of Long John Silver in the 1950 film version of Treasure Island. Newton was from the West Country of England and used his natural accent, which became the standard pirate voice. Most pirates didn't wear eye patches, peg legs, or hook hands. These were symbols of disability that would have made life at sea incredibly difficult. Pirates with serious injuries usually left the profession or died from infection. Parrots were not common pirate pets. Tropical birds were valuable and could be sold for good money. Keeping one as a pet was like having $100 bill following you around squawking. Most pirates would have sold the bird and bought rum. The Jolly Roger flag was not universal. Many pirates flew false colors to deceive their targets, and some never used skull and crossbones flags at all. The modern image of the pirate flag is a composite of several different designs. Pirate ships were not heavily armed fortresses. Most were converted merchant vessels with a few cannons added. They relied on intimidation and surprise rather than superior firepower. Sword fighting was not an elegant art form. It was desperate, brutal, and usually over quickly. Pirates fought to disable or kill their opponents as efficiently as possible, not to demonstrate their skill with a blade. Let's talk about the women who broke into this boys' club and proved they could be just as ruthless, cunning, and doomed as their male counterpart.